Guided by the values and expertise of healthcare and public health, Oregon Physicians for Social Responsibility works to protect human life from the gravest threats to health and survival by striving to protect our climate, end the nuclear threat, promote peace, and advance justice. To celebrate Oregon PSR's 40th anniversary, we're taking a look back at some of the people and the efforts that have made Oregon PSR the organization it is today. Dr. Karen Steingart of Portland attends a symposium at Harvard on the health consequences of nuclear weapons and nuclear war, and is invited to a gathering at the home of Dr. Helen Caldicott by a friend who insisted it would be the most important meeting you will ever attend. Her friend was right.
I had met a friend from Columbia College in New York, and he had already connected with the leadership of PSR. Peter invited me to come along. And so after the symposium, I found myself in the beautiful wood-paneled library in the home of Dr. Helen Caldicott. There I listened to the people who were revitalizing PSR. This is how I met Drs. Helen Caldicott, Victor Seidel, Jack Geiger, and others who were leading the efforts in PSR.
Karen is galvanized into action and returns to Portland, where she gathers other health professionals and interested community members who meet in her living room to start the Portland PSR chapter.
And initially, people did not get it. That was my sense at the time. The conversation kept returning to nuclear power and Trojan, Oregon's only nuclear power plant. It was a process of understanding and taking in the nuclear weapons and war piece, because what I was describing was unthinkable. And at some point, Dr. Caldicott suggested that she come to Portland to help us incorporate, and I think that really cinched it. Her presence was really, really important. We felt like we were doing something critically important for our patients, our families, for the world. It felt way bigger than ourselves.
At 67 years old, Dell Greenfield begins her legendary tenure of 16 years as executive director of Portland PSR. According to former board treasurer Richard Belsey, Dell was the heart and most of the hands of the organization. She takes care of people and she keeps people on track.
She was a real spark plug and was beloved not only by PSR folks, but by just a spectrum of people all over the map in the Portland area. One of the things that I loved about Dell and her husband Lou was that they would set up a booth anytime PSR had a conference or a convention, whether it was national or whether it was in the Northwest, and she would sell things like aprons and grocery bags and T-shirts, anything that had to do with PSR and would have the logo on it. It always had a white dove too. She also sold bumper stickers, peace buttons, and she was just a great resource and very enthusiastic. Anytime I got to a conference, Dell had already been there for a day and had carted in unbelievable cartons of good things, and everything she sold, all the profits went back to the chapter. And it was fun, and she was a delight.
In those early years, and back then that was the Dell Greenfield era, she was such an inspiring and incredible person and a fabulous organizer. And her husband, Lou, was kind of her sidekick. always there, very quiet and caring man, but Del was the dynamic driver of a lot of things we did.
She had incredible creativity, and she had an incredible sense of service. Many, many, many friends, and I'm just lucky and honored to be her daughter.
The group organized a day-long symposium on the medical consequences of nuclear weapons and nuclear war on April 17, 1982, at Lewis and Clark College in Portland. In addition to conferences, PSR members presented the Bombing Run slideshow to demonstrate the horrific health impacts of the use of nuclear weapons to dozens, if not hundreds, of groups in the area over the first few years. In 1985, the International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for spreading authoritative information and by creating awareness of the catastrophic consequences of nuclear war. As the local affiliate of the group, Physicians for Social Responsibility shared in the honor of being a Nobel Peace Prize recipient, and the city of Portland issued a proclamation declaring December 10th Portland PSR Day to mark the occasion.
We had a group of Soviet physicians who were touring the US, and I organized their various media visits, which is an amazing thing. And the culminating event was a big presentation they did. They gave really interesting presentations. One really memorable thing was taking them to Powell's bookstore. An amazing, some people think it's the best bookstore in the country. And they were able to find lots of books in Russian that they had no way of getting. And they were so enthralled. They bought a whole bunch of books and were just enthused about what they saw in this bookstore.
5 physicians from the Soviet Union visited Portland during a nationwide tour sponsored by PSR. The goal of the campaign was to promote dialogue and cooperation between Soviet and American physicians on one of the most pressing international public health questions of the time, the threat of nuclear annihilation. These physicians, members of the International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War, presented about global health lessons of Chernobyl and more generally their role as citizen diplomats in the nuclear age. During their visit, they lectured at hospitals and universities, met with local elected leaders, and engaged in formal and informal exchanges with the public. Locally and nationally, PSR expanded its mission to apply its medical expertise to environmental health issues in recognition of the grave risks to human health posed by global climate change and toxic pollution.
The toxics issue was real important to me. So we did a lot with working on, there was a lead screening clinic that was being done through Oregon PSR when I first came, but really trying to educate health professionals about toxins. We held several training sessions and had a program that actually was built out of the Greater Boston PSR chapter at the time, and did a lot of lobbying for trying to get flame retardants banned through the legislature and a variety of issues like that.
I was the environmental health program director. And when I came in, we were just finishing up the pediatric environmental health toolkit, which was lead, mercury, pesticides. And there was a bunch of work going on both in Oregon and nationally around endocrine disruptors. Bisphenol A was the one we were sort of concentrating on. That climate change was really coming to the fore. And of course, at that point, because of our work with mercury and the Boardman plant, we were working pretty closely with Greenpeace and also OEC.
Yeah.
And so the kind of refocusing of the effort onto climate change, I think, has been a natural thing and also a really valuable thing. And I'm really glad to see there's been some great work done. You know, everybody who's working on that issue, I think they're just doing a great job.
As Oregon PSR expanded its mission, the organization took on a variety of campaigns focusing on various environmental issues from a health perspective. Some of this work included the Campaign for Safe Foods to remove RBGH from dairy products, the campaign to create a nuclear power-free Northwest, the Healthy Food and Healthcare campaign, the passage of the Toxic Free Kids Act in Oregon after many years of work, and the campaign for a just transition away from the Covanta incinerator, to name a few. Some of these campaigns are still going on today. Oregon PSR assumed the coordination role for the annual commemoration of the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which brings out hundreds to the Japanese-American Historical Plaza in Portland's Waterfront Park annually. Throughout the years, the event featured speakers and performers such as Japanese hibakusha, or A-bomb survivors, Hanford Downwinders, drumming by Native American and taiko groups, multiple performances and art pieces by advisory board members Chizao Hata and Yukio Kawano, and Multnomah County's Thousand Cranes Awards to young people. PSR worked closely with partner organizations such as the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, the Oregon Nikkei Endowment, now the Japanese American Museum of Oregon, and JACL, the Japanese American Citizens League, as well as the American Friends Service Committee and many others to organize these collaborative commemorations.
And then the thing I got really involved with was I helped with the conference on the developing child in a violent society.
Led by co-chairs and Oregon PSR board members Bonnie Reagan and Josiah Hill, PSR organized a conference of nearly 1,000 participants on the developing child in a violent society, which was held at what was then called Madison High School, now McDaniel High School, in Portland. A similar conference was also organized by the Salem chapter of PSR. Oregon PSR board members Josiah Hill and Richard Baer began a mobile lead testing initiative primarily serving the Black community in North and Northeast Portland. Through this work, Hill created an alliance between Oregon PSR and the Coalition of Black Men. When Hill died in 2000, the Josiah Hill III Clinic was established to continue his legacy of service.
When I discovered, quite by accident, that I was a Hanford downwinder, that I had been exposed to the toxic emissions from the Hanford plutonium facility, that was in 1990, the summer of 1990. Well, I became so curious about radiation and human health. So I started a quest to get as much information as I could, go strictly by my research to satisfy my own interest in radiation health issues. I found out about Physicians for Social Responsibility. I drove up to Portland, went in their office, and their executive director was a wonderful woman named Dell Greenfield. And she greeted me and was very friendly. And I said, I've just discovered I'm a Hanford downwinder and I am trying to get information. And she said, oh, you need to talk to Rudy Nussbaum. And she just dialed the phone and handed it to me. And Rudy was on the other end of the line. I'd never met him, never heard of him. And I found out he was a retired physics and environmental science professor from Portland State. And so that's how that connection was made.
Doctors Charlie Grossman, Rudy Nussbaum, Lorene Nussbaum, and other Oregon PSR members collaborate with Hanford downwinders, including Pat Hoover, to form the Northwest Radiation Health Alliance. Together, they develop a groundbreaking community participatory study of the health impacts of radiation from Hanford and publish 7 papers in peer-reviewed journals on their findings. The collaboration bridged the gap between scientific and lay approaches.
The biggest point was that the downwinders who contacted PSR originally were given credibility. We were validated as downwinders. And that, I mean, there was never a question of, should we do this? Should we continue? Should PSR be involved in this? I mean, there was never a question about that. And then we were treated as equals with the professionals in PSR that were helping us. And that was an incredible working relationship.
In the wake of the terrorist attack of September 11, 2001, Oregon PSR mobilized with other community organizations to promote a peaceful response, organizing a memorial for all victims of violence and a call for peace. Oregon PSR was an anchoring organization for major anti-Iraq war mobilizations in Portland, helped to form the PDX Peace Coalition to broaden and diversify the peace movement, coordinated a campaign to send thousands of postcards to Congress to end the war, presented to dozens of organizations on the health effects of war, and supported a Portland City Council resolution to end the war.
With Catherine Thomason, who was the board director, we got really focused on opposing the war on terrorism. And I think that ended up being a really galvanizing issue for the chapter.
In 2015, under the leadership of new board president Dr. Pat O'Haron, the organization began its journey to infuse the values of justice and equity into all aspects of our work. This explicit commitment is being brought to life through regular discussions about justice and equity at all our staff and board meetings, periodic trainings, meetings of our anti-racist book club, and more. Our programmatic work, our partnerships, and our staff and board demographics have begun to shift over time to increasingly reflect our commitment to taking leadership from the communities most impacted by injustice as we continue along our collective journey towards justice and equity. Named in honor of legendary former executive director Del Greenfield, the Greenfield Peace Scholarship provides annual awards to Oregon high school juniors and seniors for their response to prompts concerning peace and justice issues, including nuclear disarmament, racism, immigrant justice, gun violence, and climate disruption. From 2009 to 2020, the contest was based on writing, and in 2021 it focused on visual art. To date, 40 high schoolers have been awarded cash scholarships and recognized for their vision. Oregon PSR helps build the Pacific Northwest's thin green line between fossil fuel extraction and export by bringing the health voice to the leadership of regional coalitions to prevent coal, oil, and gas pipelines, rail cars, and export facilities.
It was a thrill to work in these campaigns to kind of build the thin green line. When I started, there were 6 proposals for coal export facilities in the Pacific Northwest, and together with this amazing coalition, we staved off every one of them.
I think what PSR has been doing the last several years with stopping the coal terminals and the oil terminals and the transport of coal through the gorge, I mean, their success with that has been astounding.
Our efforts to stop coal exports is what launched Oregon PSR's Healthy Climate Program in 2012, and the victories against coal, oil, and fracked gas have stacked high ever since. In 2012, there were 6 coal export terminals proposed, 3 in Oregon and 3 in Washington. And after tireless documentation and testimony about the health impacts of fossil fuel transport, our efforts in the Power Past Coal Coalition helped secure denials of essential permits for all of them. In 2018, the lease was canceled for the nation's largest oil-by-rail terminal in Vancouver, Washington, after years of hard work with our partners in the Stand Up to Oil Coalition. That same year, Oregon PSR joined the Power Past Fracked Gas Coalition, which has secured major permit denials to stop the Jordan Cove LNG export terminal and Pacific Connector pipeline in southern Oregon, as well as the proposed Kalama fracked gas to methanol refinery in southwest Washington. And most recently, we celebrated with our partners when the city of Portland denied a key permit to the Zenith crude oil facility.
We just had a wonderful victory. The Northwest Innovation Works pulled out of the Kalama, canceled their lease with the Port of Kalama, Washington, which this fight's been going on for several years. A lot of people worked very hard, and it's just
good. Congratulations.
Really nice, yeah.
Oregon PSR was part of the steering committee for the nation's first ever Climate Justice Fund and Oregon's first environmental initiative created and led by communities of color, the Portland Clean Energy Fund. We presented a report by member Patricia Kohlberg on racial and economic health disparities in Portland and how the Portland Clean Energy Fund would benefit the health of Portland's low-income residents and people of color. Many PSR members collected signatures, phone banked, and canvassed for the initiative, and our staff supported communications and field organizing to get out the vote. The measure passed by a whopping 65% of voters, and Oregon PSR continued working with the coalition to implement the ballot measure and support the staff and grant committee in setting up this groundbreaking municipal grant fund of $44 to $61 million in annual support for rooftop solar projects, energy efficiency home upgrades, clean energy job training programs in regenerative agriculture, and tree canopy projects with priority given to low-income Portlanders and communities of color. Oregon's legislature voted to approve Senate Joint Memorial 5, which supports the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons and urges Congress to lead a global effort to reduce the threat of nuclear war, making it the second state in the nation to pass such legislation in both chambers. The bill was introduced at the request of Oregon PSR with the support of 31 organizations around the state and garnered moving testimony from a Japanese hibakusha or A-bomb survivor, a Hanford downwinder, an atomic veteran, the Oregon Marshallese community, a Corvallis city councilor, and others. Portland City Council passed a similar resolution later that year, with Commissioner Chloe Eudaly remarking, "The testimony I have heard here today will echo in my mind forever." Oregon PSR organized a lively online celebration to mark the entry into force of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. The event featured a hibakusha or A-bomb survivor, Hideko Tamura, Marshallese activist Kiana Judah Angelo, author of African Americans Against the Bomb, Vincent Intondi, and elected officials, including Congressman Earl Blumenauer.
Beatrice Finn, Executive Director of the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, also known as ICAN, says, "This is a new chapter for nuclear disarmament. Decades of activism have achieved what many said was impossible. Nuclear weapons are banned. There will only be one treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons ever, and it will only enter into force once, January 22nd, 2021.
I never thought that I would live to the day when enough country will sign on so that the ban treaty will be into force.
Oregon PSR joined the executive committee of a statewide campaign for environmental justice legislation that yielded a clean sweep of 3 new groundbreaking climate and energy justice bills signed into law: the Oregon Energy Affordability Act, Healthy Homes, and 100% Clean Energy for All. All 3 bills were made possible by rural and Black, Indigenous, and people of color-led environmental justice organizations, leading stakeholder conversations to reach consensus and deeply ground each bill in the values and principles of environmental justice. Together, these bills will limit utility bills and invest in home repairs and community-based renewable energy projects for low-income Oregonians while transitioning the state's electricity grid to 100% emissions-free electricity by 2040 and explicitly banning new or expanded fossil fuel power plants. Our health-based testimony in support of each bill and communications and lobbying support helped to secure these major milestones for climate justice and a Green New Deal for Oregon amid Oregon's first ever full legislative session held remotely during the COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you to all of Oregon PSR's members, volunteers, donors, and leaders who've made 40 years of pursuing a more healthy, peaceful, and just world possible.
And I love working with Oregon PSR because it allows me to be effective with limited time, working on issues like fighting climate change and preventing nuclear war. I'm very busy in my job as a general surgeon and with my family and life, and so it's certainly not something I could do on my own, and instead I get to work with a lot of really great people who I enjoy working with and care deeply about.
What I value most about Oregon PSR is our understanding of the interconnected nature of the work that we do, from working for a healthier climate to working to end nuclear weapons, from working against gun violence and racial injustice. We understand that everything we do is intimately interconnected.
I value that it gives health professionals a chance to have a voice beyond just the role that they play in the office.
The information that you get from PSR is quite reliable. It's based in science. It certainly has an advocacy spin. There's no doubt we're advocating for something, but you know that the science is sound.
Oregon PSR can continue to play a big role, especially in climate change, and making sure that in these conversations no matter how partisan they can get, we're always coming back to the science and making sure that we're talking about the science and its impact on people, all people, no matter what your party is or your political persuasion. Health impacts impact everybody, and I think Oregon PSR will continue to play a really important role in educating folks and focusing folks on health and the importance of listening to the science when it comes to these topics.
I think what I value the most about Oregon PSR is the fact that we are both visionary and strategic. So we know that we are a part of a broader movement of people who are working together, and that sometimes we step forward, sometimes we step back to get a lot of good done for climate justice and public health.
There's very smart, very talented people involved. Number one. Number two, it's not just physicians, it's open to the general public and even beyond healthcare providers. So physicians, nurses, social workers, plus anybody can join, which I like. And that allows you to get different perspectives too. They are very well connected and know how to lobby and how to present their case before the state legislature, before city committees.
I think the other adage that has kept me connected with PSR over these many years is that we speak truth to power. So what a group. What a group. just a joy to work with.
PSR is so attuned to the needs of their community, whether it's the state or the Northwest or the city of Portland. Mm-hmm. And they are non-discriminating. I mean, anybody from any walk of life can come to them with a question or a need or something that PSR could help them with, and they get listened to and they get heard. They're very good about their outreach and who they're working with, and it's a wonderful organization in that way.
As much as anything, it's just gratitude for a wonderful 7 years plus, and I really just appreciate what everybody did for me.
Just that they were really great years, and it was wonderful working with you and the other fabulous people like Rudy and Andy and on the board, and particularly Catherine Thomason. Yeah. And I think we all made a really good team.
It's been my great pleasure to work with these very bright and dedicated people at PSR for the last 20 years. I've served on the board and done stints as president, and I look forward to continuing that work with these wonderful people.
Oregon PSR is a really impressive, well-run chapter. It's that role of authority in the health field and using that for the betterment of society, public health.
And I just can't emphasize enough the really important thing to me about PSR are the amazing people, the energetic people who grabbed onto these issues and have made a big difference. And I just feel so proud to be a member.
I'm so grateful to every board member, staff member, and volunteer at Oregon PSR who over the past several decades have done such invaluable work in bridging the gap between justice and science. Thank you so much to each and every single one of you.
Well, I think the other thing that that the group, the board, and with Kelly's leadership that has really embraced, and that is helping reach across organizations in embracing justice issues. That we have to work with and promote leadership of people who are most impacted.
The work that they do is extremely important. And I think that the coalition building that they've been doing the last, I don't know how many years, is extremely important.
What I value most about OPSR is our commitment to supporting and being an ally to climate justice initiatives that are led by frontline and historically excluded communities.
My hope for the future of Oregon PSR
is that we are working together collaboratively and collectively for health equity and wellness for all. That we work across land, language, culture, access, and ability. That we're constantly moving from acknowledgement into action for the communities that we serve and the communities that we represent. Thank you.
What I value most about Oregon PSR is the incredible people who bring their passion and their dedication to this organization and have made us such an effective force for health, for peace, and for justice for the past 40 years. Thank you.